Well, good day, all you Bible readers. Today is April the 6th. Yesterday, we finished up with our 13th judge, Samson. We won't see our next judge appear until the book of 1 Samuel, and that'll be Eli. So we have this whole section of judges where there is no judge mentioned in the events that are covered from chapter 17 through chapter 21. Now, this could imply that there may not have been a judge in place during these events, or it may have happened concurrently when another judge was ruling. We just don't know. Just like the book of Ruth, it says it happened in the time of judges, but which judge? Well, apparently that's not important to the story. So I do have a take on all this myself, but I'll share that with you at the end, so hang in there. I also want to give a disclaimer at this point and let you know we're about to encounter one of the most horrible incidences ever recorded in the Bible, and it may contain things that are difficult to hear. So take appropriate measures with those who may be watching with you. In chapter 19, it opens with the phrase that is very important. In those days, there was no king in Israel. In fact, this is the third of 4 times this phrase will be repeated from 17 through 21. The key thing is there's no judge mentioned either. We have an unnamed Levite who lives somewhere in the land allotted to Ephraim, and he took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. Now this concubine was unfaithful to him and went back home to her father's house and stayed there for 4 months before her husband ever went back to patch things up with her and bring her home. He arrives at his father-in-law's house with servants and donkeys, and his father-in-law seems overjoyed to see him. In fact, he made him stay 3 days and maneuvered him into staying 2 more days until it was too late in the afternoon when they finally departed for their journey home. They made it out of Judah, and they came to the land that belonged to the tribe of Benjamin. And they turned into the town of Gibeah, but they didn't find lodging at first, and prepared to spend the night in the town square. Then a man returning from the field saw them and offered them that they could stay in his house for the night because they were too vulnerable and exposed in the square. Now, this is the point where I would ask, just what am I too exposed to here in the square, and what kind of town is this? As soon as they got settled into the man's house, the men of Gibeah surrounded the house and demanded that the Levite man be turned over to them so they could know him. This should sound familiar because it's the same behavior we saw the men in Sodom. Then the man who owned the house pleaded with the mob, "Don't do this thing." And just like Lot offered his daughters to the men of Sodom, so this man offered his virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine to the men of Gibeah. Well, he seized the concubine and he tosses her out to the mob, and they raped her and they abused her all night long until morning. Well, in the morning, when the Levite comes out, he sees her lying at the door. And does he say anything like, "Are you all right, dear? Are you hurt? Can I help you?" No. He says, "Get up. It's time to go." Well, Mr. Sensitive here discovers that she's non-responsive and probably dead or close to it. So he loads her up on the donkey and he heads for home. Well, as soon as he arrives at home, the Levite goes into his house and grabs a knife. And he comes and cuts her up into 12 pieces and sends 1 piece to each tribe of Israel along with the report of what happened. The people's response was, "Nothing like this has ever been seen before, ever happened," and they were shocked and wondering just what they should do about it. The question I have is, why did the Levite chop her up and use her to send a message to all the tribes? Well, consider this. Being a Levite, sojourning in a remote part of Ephraim, he did not have a tribe to call upon since Levi was scattered throughout all the land. Second, he was just one guy, and he himself a Levite, not a man of war, has almost 0 chance of avenging his wife's death alone. Third, in addition to the murder of the woman by the men of Gibeah, their behavior was a total abomination to God, for which the penalty was death. And he needed to muster all the tribes, including Benjamin, so that justice could be dealt out with for the city of Gibeah. Remember, if a city acted abominably before God, they were commanded to wipe them out. Well, being a Levite, he knew the law well enough to manipulate the tribe's reactions and to accomplish the role as the avenger of blood. He only miscalculated in one area. The tribe of Benjamin stuck with their brothers in Gibeah. Because of this, the other tribes of Israel pledged that they would not allow any of their daughters to be given as wives to the tribe of Benjamin. So now we have 11 tribes against 1 tribe, and a reckoning is about to happen. 400,000 men of Israel versus 27,000 men of Benjamin. And when the dust is settled, 51,000 men will be killed in battle, along with their entire city of Gibeon, and only 600 of the tribe of Benjamin will remain. Now, Israel sued for peace with Benjamin because they didn't want to wipe out one tribe completely, but they had a big problem. There's not enough women to go around to provide these guys wives for all 600. Now, how do we solve the problem? Well, they took notice that in the camp of all of Israel, there's some people that didn't show up. There was one city that didn't send any men. So Israel fell upon that city, killed everyone except the virgins, and brought them to the Benjamites. But there was still not enough to go around. So they needed more women, and they devised a scheme for the Benjamites, still needing wives, to steal them from a celebration at the city of Shiloh. When the virgin daughters would come out to do a dance, they would snatch themselves a bride and carry her off, just so that the other tribes could keep their vow not to provide any daughters in marriage to Benjamin. They plotted this kidnapping scheme so they wouldn't break their vow. This by far is one of the most bizarre stories in the Bible. But wait, there's more. Except for the inquiring of the Lord as to who should go up and fight, everyone in this story tried to solve this issue by their own means. One thing leads to the next, and each round creates a bigger mess of things. We see that God did keep his word. He did not go before them in these battles, but he allowed 51,000 men to be slaughtered. He did deal with the abomination of the sin of Gibeah and wiped it out. And he did restore them back to a state of rest, but preserved all the tribes, but at a huge cost. It's just never a good idea to try to fix your problems on your own. Oh, remember the phrase that I told you was repeated 4 times in chapter 17 through 21 of Judges? Well, the very last chapter, 21-25, ties a bow around this whole package. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. The key takeaway for me is seeing how God removed his hand from Israel because they did evil and they disobeyed. He allowed them room to fix their own problems, which they all took their own initiative, and the law was only consulted when it suited their purpose. When left to our own devices, we will mess up things with consequences we don't expect. And many people beyond our own selves will be impacted. A good reminder to seek him first in all that we do. Well, that's all I have for you today until next time. And I hope that you find some encouragement to keep your eyes focused on what God is leading and not what we decide in our own hearts. See you tomorrow.